I always knew my sister Rachel would try to ruin my wedding. I just didn't expect her to do it quite so spectacularly. My name is Emma Collins, and I met the love of my life, James, while he was waiting tables at a small Italian restaurant in downtown Boston. At least that's what everyone thought. The truth was far more interesting, but we'll get to that. He's a waiter. Rachel had sneered when I told my family about him. Really, Emma? With your education and background, you could do so much better. That was Rachel, always measuring everything by status and money. She'd married a hedge fund manager right out of college and never let anyone forget it. The fact that I, her Yale-educated younger sister, would settle for someone who served pasta for a living was apparently a personal affront. What she didn't know was that James had a very good reason for working at that restaurant. As the secret heir to the Romano restaurant empire, he believed in learning the business from the ground up, every aspect of it, from washing dishes to serving customers. But we'd agreed to keep that quiet until after the wedding. Let them judge, he'd said, his dark eyes twinkling. It's more fun that way. The morning of our wedding was bright and clear. The small church we'd chosen was perfect, intimate, elegant, nothing like the extravagant affair Rachel had thrown for her own wedding 3 years ago. I was in the bridal suite, my mother fussing with my veil, when Rachel burst in. "You can't go through with this," she declared, still wearing her designer dress-like armor. "Do you know what people are saying? That you've lost your mind." "The only person saying that is you, Rachel," my mother said tiredly. She'd grown weary of Rachel's drama over the past few months. "Mom, she's throwing her life away. He probably just wants her money." I couldn't help but laugh at that. My modest teacher salary, compared to James's hidden billions, was almost comical. But Rachel took my laughter as defiance. "Fine," she snapped. "Ruin your life, but don't come crying to me when you're living in some cramped apartment above a restaurant." If she only knew about the penthouse James and I had already picked out, or the private island where we'd be spending our honeymoon. But I held my tongue, remembering our agreement. The truth would come out soon enough. The ceremony began beautifully. James stood at the altar, looking handsome in his tailored suit, which Rachel had probably assumed was rented. Our closest friends and family filled the pews, though notably fewer on my side, since Rachel had convinced several relatives it wasn't worth attending. Then came the moment that would be talked about for years to come. If anyone knows any reason why these two should not be joined in marriage, speak now or forever hold your peace. Rachel stood up. "This is ridiculous," she shouted, her voice echoing through the church. "Emma, you're making a huge mistake. You're better than this. You're marrying a waiter, for God's sake. How pathetic can you be?" The church fell silent. James squeezed my hand gently, and I saw the corner of his mouth twitch. "Should we tell her?" he whispered. I shook my head slightly. "Not yet." Rachel wasn't finished. She stormed toward the altar, her expensive heels clicking against the stone floor. "Everyone here knows this is a joke. Emma, you were supposed to be the smart one, the successful one, and now look at you, throwing it all away on some server." "Rachel." Our father warned from the front pew, but she ignored him. "When this all falls apart, don't expect any sympathy from me. You've made your bed, probably a very cheap one. Now lie in it." With that final shot, she turned and stormed out of the church, leaving stunned silence in her wake. The minister cleared his throat awkwardly. "Shall we continue?" I looked up at James and saw the love and amusement dancing in his eyes. "Yes," I said firmly. "Let's continue." The rest of the ceremony was perfect, made even better by Rachel's absence. As we exchanged rings, I couldn't help but think about what was coming. The reception would be at one of James's family's most exclusive restaurants, one that had been mysteriously closed to the public for the day. Rachel had no idea that her very public tantrum was about to backfire in the most spectacular way possible. And I couldn't wait to see her face when she realized just how wrong she'd been about everything. But first, we had to get through the pictures and the drive to the reception. James helped me into the rented vintage Rolls-Royce, actually from his personal collection, as our guest showered us with rice. "Ready for Act Two," he murmured in my ear. I smiled, thinking of the scene that was about to unfold at the reception. More than ready. "Do you think she'll show up?" I asked. "Oh, she'll show up," he said confidently. "People like Rachel can't resist a chance to feel superior. She'll come just to watch what she thinks will be a cheap, embarrassing reception." He was right, of course. Rachel might have stormed out of the ceremony, but there was no way she'd miss the chance to criticize every detail of our celebration. She had no idea she was walking into a reveal that would leave her speechless. As we drove toward the reception, I thought about how perfectly everything had played out. Rachel's outburst, while hurtful, had only made what was coming sweeter. Sometimes the best revenge isn't about getting even. It's about letting someone's own actions set the stage for their humiliation. The Romano, James's family's flagship restaurant, loomed ahead. Its elegant facade and prime location usually hosted celebrities and dignitaries. Today, it would host a revelation that would change my family dynamic forever. "Here we go," James said, helping me out of the car. "Ready to show your sister who she really just insulted in front of everyone." I smoothed my dress and took his arm. "Let's give her a show she'll never forget." The doors of the Romano swung open, and I heard the collective gasp from our arriving guests. Crystal chandeliers cast a warm glow over marble floors and hand-painted murals. White glove servers circulated with champagne, each bottle worth more than what most people thought James made in a month. "This must be a mistake," I heard someone whisper. How could they afford this place? Rachel arrived fashionably late, probably expecting to find us in some budget banquet hall. She froze in the doorway, her perfectly made-up face twisted in confusion. "There's been a mix-up," she said loudly, approaching me. "This is the Romano. They don't do wedding receptions. Ever." "They made an exception," James said smoothly, appearing at my side. Before Rachel could respond, an elderly man in an impeccable suit approached us. Everyone in the restaurant business knew Antonio Romano, the patriarch of the Romano Empire. He was notoriously private, rarely seen in public. "James," he said warmly, embracing my husband. "My grandson, finally married to his beautiful Emma." The silence in the room was deafening. Rachel's champagne glass slipped from her fingers, shattering on the marble floor. "Grandson," she choked out. "What do you mean, grandson?" Antonio turned to her, his eyes sharp despite his age. "And you must be the sister who caused such a scene at the church. Tell me, what was it you called my grandson?" "Ah, yes, some server." The color drained from Rachel's face as the truth sank in. James wasn't just a waiter. He was the heir to one of the largest restaurant empires in the country. The Romano Group owned hundreds of high-end establishments across the globe, along with hotels, vineyards, and real estate. I didn't know," she stammered, clearly stunned. Antonio said dryly, "Perhaps next time you'll remember that true class isn't about what someone does for a living, but how they treat others." James squeezed my hand as Rachel stood there mortified. Around us, guests were beginning to whisper as they pieced together the truth. The simple wedding ceremony, followed by this lavish reception, the waiter who was actually restaurant royalty. "Why didn't you tell me?" Rachel demanded, finding her voice. "You let me believe." You let me make a fool of myself." Would it have mattered? I asked quietly. Would you have treated James differently if you'd known who he really was? Because that's exactly why we didn't tell anyone. We wanted to know who our true friends were. "But I'm your sister," Rachel cried. "Yes," I said, "which makes your behavior even worse. You couldn't even be happy for me unless you approved of my choice's social status." Antonio cleared his throat. "If you'd like to leave, no one would blame you. You've already provided enough entertainment for one day." Rachel's face flushed deep red. She looked around the room, seeing the judgment in everyone's eyes. The same people who had witnessed her outburst at the church were now watching her humiliation. "I should go," she muttered. "Stay," James said unexpectedly. Everyone turned to look at him. "Stay, enjoy the reception. Consider it a chance to start over, to see people for who they are, not what they own or what they do for a living." I looked at my husband with pride. Even after Rachel's awful behavior, he was showing more class than she ever had. She hesitated, then slowly nodded. "I'd like that. And I owe you both an apology." "Yes, you do," Antonio agreed. "But perhaps that can wait until after the first dance. I believe my grandson and his bride have waited long enough to celebrate properly." As James led me to the dance floor, I caught glimpses of Rachel's face. She stood alone, watching a squirrel beneath the chandeliers, probably calculating how many times she'd have to apologize before she could start bragging about her connection to the Romano family. "She'll never change completely," James murmured, reading my thoughts as always. "No," I agreed, "but maybe she'll think twice before judging someone based on their job again." The reception continued like a fairy tale, course after exquisite course of Romano specialties, wine from the family's private reserve, and stories from James's time working his way up through every position in the restaurant. He insisted on starting at the bottom. Antonio told her captivated guests he needed to understand every aspect of the business. "Most trust fund kids want to start in a corporate office, not mine." I watched Rachel's face as she realized just how wrong she'd been. The waiter she dismissed had shown more work ethic and humility than her hedge fund husband ever had. As the night went on, I saw her try to approach us several times, probably to apologize or attempt damage control. But there was always someone else wanting to talk to us, to share a story, or offer congratulations. Her social punishment would last a bit longer. After all, she'd spent months making me feel small. A few hours of humility wouldn't kill her. Besides, we had other things to focus on, like the honeymoon villa waiting for us on the Romano family's private island. But that was another surprise for another day. For now, I was content to dance with my husband, surrounded by people who loved us for who we were, not what we owned. And if my sister learned something from all this, well, that was just icing on our very expensive wedding cake. A year passed, and life settled into a new rhythm. James and I moved into our penthouse overlooking Boston Harbor, and I continued teaching while he took on more responsibilities within the Romano group. We kept things low-key, just as we always had. But Rachel struggled with our newfound dynamic. "You could at least let me host a proper housewarming," she complained one afternoon, eyeing our minimalist decor. "This place deserves to be shown off." "That's exactly why we don't show it off," I replied. "Some things are better kept private." She didn't understand. She'd spent the past year trying to rebuild her reputation, dropping the Romano name whenever possible. Her social media was suddenly full of posts about my sister and her husband's amazing restaurants and family dinners at the Romano. James found it amusing. "At least she's promoting the business," he'd say with a shrug. But everything changed when Rachel's perfect world started crumbling. Her hedge fund husband, Michael, got caught in a scandal: insider trading, fraud, the works. Suddenly, the wealth she'd lorded over everyone was gone, frozen by federal investigators. She showed up at our door late one night, mascara streaking down her face. "They're taking everything," she sobbed. "The house, the cars. Michael's facing jail time. I don't know what to do." I led her to the living room, where James was working on his laptop. He looked up, concern crossing his face. "I need help," Rachel admitted, the words clearly cutting her pride. I don't know how to start over." James and I exchanged glances. This was the moment. Would we help the sister who tried to ruin our wedding? Who'd only accepted us after learning about our wealth? "There's an apartment," James said finally, "above one of our smaller restaurants in Cambridge. It's nothing fancy, but it's a start." Rachel's eyes widened. "You do that? After how I treated you?" "On one condition," I added. "You work in the restaurant. Learn the business from the ground up, just like James did. You can wait tables." She looked horrified. "Among other things," James said. "Wash dishes, bus tables, learn to cook, understand what it means to earn your way." Rachel was quiet for a long time, probably wrestling with her pride. Finally, she nodded. "Okay, I'll do it. But will you help me? Show me how." That was the moment I knew my sister might actually change. The next few months were transformative. Rachel moved into the small apartment, traded her designer clothes for sensible shoes and work uniforms. She cried the first time she had to clean a bathroom, broke 3 plates her first night serving, and burnt herself twice learning to cook. But she didn't quit. I watched her transform from someone who looked down on service workers to someone who defended them. She started leaving bigger tips at other restaurants, calling out rude customers, and appreciating the complexity of work she once dismissed. 6 months into her new life, I visited her at work. She was expediting orders, her hair tied back, completely focused on her task. No makeup, no pretense, just honest work. "She's doing well," James said, appearing beside me. "The staff actually likes her now. Think she's learned her lesson." He smiled. "I think she's learned several. Want to tell her the other news?" I nodded, waiting until her shift ended. Rachel joined us at a corner table, exhausted but somehow more genuine than I had ever seen her. "How would you feel about managing this place?" James asked casually. Rachel's eyes widened. "Really?" "You've learned every position, earned the respect of the staff. The current manager is moving to our new location in Chicago. The job's yours if you want it." "But why?" she asked. "Because you proved us wrong," I said softly. "We thought you couldn't change, that you'd always be the person who cared more about status than substance. But look at you now." Tears filled her eyes. "I was awful to both of you. I let money and status blind me to what really matters. And now," James prompted, "now I know that what matters is who people are, not what they own or what they do for a living." She wiped her eyes. "I'm actually proud to be a server now. Proud of what I've learned, what I can do." Later that night, as James and I walked home, he squeezed my hand. "Your sister finally found her way," he said. "Our way," I corrected. "The hard way, the honest way." Think she's ready for the family reunion next month when everyone finds out she's managing one of our restaurants. I laughed, imagining Rachel probably wearing her Romano restaurant uniform to the fancy gathering. I think she's finally ready to be herself, no matter what anyone thinks. And that was the greatest victory of all. Not the wedding reveal, not the humbling aftermath, but watching my sister discover who she really was beneath all the designer labels and social climbing. Sometimes the best revenge isn't about getting even. It's about helping someone grow into a better person. Rachel's transformation from judgmental socially to hardworking restaurant manager was proof that people can change, if given the right opportunity and motivation. As for James and me, we continued living simply, working hard, and remembering that true wealth isn't about what you have. It's about who you are and how you treat others. That's a lesson worth more than all the Romano billions combined.